to the Vlog.
Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Easy Does It. If you've clicked on this, you know we're going to be talking about sweeteners today. As we normally do, we're going to start off with market share. Single flavor tasting is not really that necessary, so we're going to be talking about the taste of some of the different sweeteners out there and what we know about them, and potentially some applications. So yeah, this is a show for sweeteners in general, but we're going to look a little bit more in depth of super sweet. So Richard, you want to kick us off?
Right. Both ATF and ELR have very similar ratios for the sweeteners in terms of popularity. Obviously, as such a ubiquitously popular ingredient for recipe, sweeteners are going to be among the most used flavors or additives of all. So let's start off with all the flavors, where Capella Super Sweet comes in as the most popular DIY flavor of all, in first place on their top 100 list, with 21,940 recipes. In second place, at least in second place in terms of sweeteners, but 10th place overall, is TFA Sweetener with 8,242 recipes. Then further down the list, but still in the top 100 flavors, is TFA Ethyl Maltol with 2,446 recipes. Then bringing up the rear somewhat, Flavor West Sweetener with 1,564, and Flavora Sweetness with 1,540 recipes. Moving across to ELR, Capella Super Sweet again ruling the roost with 189,779 recipes. TFA Sweetener comes in second place again at, it seems like TFA Sweetener comes in first place at 237,367 recipes. So it looks like TFA is top there.
So just to be sure, so Cap Super Sweet is not the most popular on ELR. It's actually TFA Sweetener.
Just double check that for you.
Because I'd really be interested to know that. That'd be like a significant difference, if it was.
237,391 for TFA Sweetener. Cap Super Sweet, 189,841. So yeah, the TFA trumps it at ELR. TFA Sweetener is the most popular sweetener. Then in third place we have, now gets difficult because ELR doesn't seem to classify ethyl maltol. TFA ethyl maltol is a separate flavor. It kind of bundles it together with cotton candy. But that comes in third place at 163,412. And then quite interestingly, Flavor West Sweetener vastly exceeds Flavora Sweetness at ELR. So they're about the same at ATF. 1564 versus 1540, but at ELR, Flavor West Sweetener comes in at 39,447 recipes, with only 4,328 for Flavora Sweetness. That probably just reflects the relative newness of the Flavora Sweetener. But yeah, interesting there that Capella is 2.5 times as popular as TFA at all the flavors. And yet at ELR, TFA comes in probably about 20% higher than Capella Super Sweet. So a bit of a difference there, but clearly the Capella and TFA by far the two most popular sweeteners on the market.
Yeah, so that is interesting. I really didn't expect that. I thought Cap Super Sweet was going to be the ruler of sweeteners. So it does look like there's still pretty much a big battle going on between the two. Which is really interesting, that it's different. I haven't seen many differences, only a little bit normally when we speak between ELR and ATF, between the ratios, but generally they are the same. But this is a significant one, which is, should be noted. Thanks, Richard. So yeah, single flavor testing on this one. The sweetener episode is a little bit easier. I mean, I've used all of these sweeteners that we're going to be talking about now in recipes. Single flavor testing them, I don't think it's that necessary because I've tasted them in so many different recipes. I've got a very good idea, but I've put a drop on the on the back of the hand and did the knuckle test with them just to get a sense of what really is sweeter and what isn't. We're gonna sort of splice this with application as well, but let's kick off with Cap Super Sweet, right, which is my favorite sweetener, and of course, what we wanted to spotlight for this show. So I love using this. I mean, I think it's got many different kind of application. Also works well across fruits, beverages, even a little bit in tobaccos, desserts, bakeries. It is that versatile. But what else are you guys using it for? Deets, what do you use it for?
It really depends on what I'm going for, and I don't really use it in the same way with every profile. But I use it mainly with fruits and candies and fruit beverages or beverages in general. If it's a candy, I mean, when it comes to sweetening, it's pretty much the same as sugar. It's funny though, because I don't drink sugar or use sweetener or anything in coffee or in food or stuff like that. But with my vape, I like sweet vapes, like a sweet fruit juice. So specifically with the fruits and stuff, if I eat the fruit, it's sweet. If I eat a chocolate, there's sugar. If I drink a milkshake, there's sugar. So the same applies in what I like to vape. If it's a realistic vape, then you used sweetener of some sorts in it, depending on what you are mixing. Not everything. I mean, like with tobaccos, I have seen people using it in tobaccos, but it doesn't always work for me. It can work with a cream, so technically it works with everything. Depends on who you are and what you like. It is definitely one of the most versatile, because it depends on what you want. Or maybe not the most, but it's a very versatile concentrate. So to give you a better idea, I can tell you how I use it and the percentage ranges. So when I use it, I generally use it to boost a natural fruit sweetness, and that's the lowest I would use it is between 0.25 to 0.04%. And from about 0.5%, I'd use it for general sweetening of anything that needs a little bit of sweetness. Like, for instance, the fruits that aren't generally sweet, or Cap Super Sweet, I mean Cap Sweet Strawberry or something like that. There are some concentrates that are sweet on their own, but then there are a lot that are not sweet enough. So if you are mixing a specific fruit and you need that realistic little bit of sugar, but you're not sure where to start, then I would start at 0.5% for general sweetening. Then for candies and very sweet desserts or chocolate stuff, then I would go up to 0.7%. But also from there, I feel it starts gunking coils to a point where it's not really, I'm lazy, so I don't enjoy wicking every single day unless I need to do different testing of stuff. Then there's the crazy extreme range where it's 1% and up, and it's not always crazy extreme. The only place I would use it at 1% and have used it at 1% is where you want that sugar, that intense sugar sweetness, or the sugar profile that it adds to a juice, that sweet juice. That's also where a lot of the commercial style juices start from. I would say is the 1% range, and that's not to my liking. It's just too messy on the quills. So that's just a general range of my percentage uses, but I would use it with everything depending on how sweet the profile calls for.
Richard, what do you use it for? Is there any hacks or things that you know about Super Sweet? that you use it for, other than, you know, what Dietz has just said?
Just the usual thing of helping fruits to pop. And then also, very interestingly, a couple of weeks ago when we were doing Slashbow's recipes, he mentioned that he used super sweet together with FA meringue and FA Tyrone to create a glaze for his donut, because he felt that meringue and Tyrone are both fairly dry flavors, and that the super sweet just moistened the sugar in those flavors and turned it into a glaze rather than a dry sugar. So there's little hacks like that. Sweetness does add moisture at times. It helps things to pop and stand out and so on. So it's just a case of experimenting and you know, finding out what it can add to your recipe other than just that sucralose note of sweetness.
Yeah, 100%. I think, you know, the only other things that I would like to add on Cap Super Sweet, it really looks like, for me, that, you know, the gunking for Cap Super Sweet starts happening anywhere, you know, anywhere from 0.5 and up, right? But it really is largely dependent on what flavors you are using with it. Okay, it doesn't gunk as bad as some of the others that we will discuss now, but it definitely will gunk. You know, if you don't use this with other concentrates, that's not prone to that. Okay, but some other things for me that I've found with this, if you're using, for instance, berries, and I recently made a recipe that Grapey Vapey, shout out to Dietz there for the name, thank you very much. But I recently made that recipe, put it out there. I used grapes, and grapes, same as berries, they're quite thin, you know, and they just read sort of at the top of that vape experience. And what really helps create a syrupiness or a body, you know, if you just bump up the Cap Super Sweet a little bit, right? So in that recipe, I think it was at 0.7, so I went from 0.5 to 0.7. It helps with that syrupiness, and that imitates a bit more body on fruits. So that's one thing. And like Richard said, you know, it can help a fruit pop a little bit more. Very useful and stuff like creating a glazed donut. That's pretty much it that I have on Cap Super Sweet. This is my favorite one. Then TFA Sweetener, which is, you know, the most popular one on ELR, which has got the biggest database of recipes. You know, there's no looking past that. So Rudy was saying here that he's found that TFA Sweetener adds a little bit of texture. You know, what do you guys think? Dietz, do you use this other than just the general sweetener? Or what is your findings with TFA?
Really only the general sweetener, but it went to super sweet. I bought TFA when I saw a few comments about it initially. See, when I started mixing, I didn't use any sweetener. Actually, no additives. It was just the flavors or base flavors or whatever. I mean, it was my first 2 weeks probably of mixing, and I found all my mixes lacked. So a lot of reading, and I believe Rudy gave me the first tip, either Rudy or Richard or both of them, because in the beginning when I got advice on our local forum, the advice from Rudy and Richard used to pop up one after the other, mentioning the same thing. They were always very quick to answer, or they are always quick to answer on the forum. But sweetener was the one thing they mentioned could be missing, and that's one thing I learned with the fruits profile. It's almost like it's thinned down, and you can explain it the same as tasting real sugar in a beverage and tasting artificial sugar. If you mix it only with the flavors for stuff like fruit, and it's not applicable to everything like desserts, and I'm not saying throw sweetener at everything, but specifically what I found with my fruits and candies was they were a little bit lacking, and you can't say it's you can't taste it, or it's just missing in a profile. So adding that sweetener, what you also just mentioned, it does help for the texture, but I think it helps you with the texture because in your mind you expect and already know what a profile tastes like. So you have an idea of what an apple tasted like because you've had an apple. So that sweetener has a big part in what it exists to you. So when I added sweetener, I started with the TFA, and I found to me just at the percentages I liked it at in the beginning because it was new, so I used a lot of it. It left aftertaste that I didn't enjoy. So I found with Capella, it's almost like it was a little bit stronger without any aftertaste or funny notes, artificial type of aftertaste, that artificial sugar, and I just went with Cap from there. But it was only used for sweetening up the profile, but at the same time fixing the profile that was missing.
Richard?
No, I don't have much to add there. I don't. I tend not to use sweetener that much. I try to find my sweetness from the ingredients that I'm using. I would rather use powdered sugar. I'd rather use Fuji or pear. Something that adds sweetener naturally than just adding sucralose in. So I haven't really noticed that it adds much in the way of body or texture, whatever, because when I do add it, it's 1 drop per 30 ml or 2 drops per 30 ml max. So it's not really something that I have experimented with much.
Yeah, a little bit of a side note. I'm glad you touched on that, Richard. A little bit of a side note on this topic. A lot of people are very anti, sweetener, and I've got a sweet tooth, so I sort of reach 3 o'clock in the afternoon and I'm already thinking, what kind of Skittles or sugary treat am I going to go and spoil myself with every single day? So I've got that sweet tooth, right? And it kicks in like as clockwork, 3 o'clock every day. So I'm not scared of using this, and I also don't think people should be scared or think it's a bad thing. There's also a stigma around commercial juice being sweeter out there, which is just something to be noted. Commercial juice is generally sweeter, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think for a lot of palates out there, they find the commercial juices too sweet. That's generally what converts them to DIY, which is a good thing, But same as what Deed said over here with TFA sweetener, I found that this one gunked for me, pretty easily. It's not my favorite to work with, as he mentioned as well, that it's got a bit of an aftertaste to it, almost like that sweetener that you would throw in your coffee or your tea, which is not sugar. If you're trying to avoid actual sugar, that's the taste that I'm getting from TFA sweetener. And between the two, Cap Super Sweet is definitely much sweeter than TFA sweetener, with way less of an impact on the actual profile itself, so that's pretty much it. Then the other one I want to chat about is EM. So Dietz, I don't know, do you want to talk about EM, because I think there is some applications for this one, right?
Yes. Now, for me, if you asked me a few months ago, my answer would have been I hate EM, and I generally dislike it. It just does not work for me. I bought a crappy brand. I think the first one I bought was a local flavor house in South Africa, and the flavor of theirs was just what broke it for me. I started using it a few months ago in some profiles, but more in an additive way. So there are applications to it, but I generally don't like it because of however I used it initially. Maybe it still does that, but it's just not in my preference or in my use because of how I used it. I think it has uses though, but I don't really use it much.
Richard, do you have a couple of, I'm sure from a couple of recipes we've seen, some applications out there. What do you think?
In terms of EM, probably the only thing I would use it for. I mean, it's had a boost in popularity recently because of the Creed's use of it in custard, which has now become an accepted use of it to boost a custard. I would probably only use it mainly in citrus and sharp fruit type recipes, just to try and knock off rough edges. But even there, I wouldn't use EM. I'd use strawberry ripe. I'd use marshmallow. Something that's rich in EM. But I'm adding a bit of flavour and not just that straight EM note. So again, it's something I try to do with flavours rather than additives.
Yeah, 100%.
Something I forgot to mention, sorry, Theo. It really affects the profile a lot. And that was another thing with TFA. The higher I pushed it, the more it affected the way the sweetness came into the mix, or blended or changed the profile. Where Capella, you can still push, it'll push the sweetness, but it won't bend the flavor or profile. And the same, EM is horrifying the way it changes the profile if you use it the way I did. So
yeah, I can remember, buying commercial juice and, finding these two different kinds of sweetness, and, hating EM and not really knowing that it was EM until I started DIYing and realizing, oh, it's this stuff. They're using this stuff and this is not what I like. But like Richard said, there's tons of applications over here. So I think it has its uses, like force muting, also I think, or like Richard said, knocking off some of the harshness of citrus vapes or berries, that can really help. Something we didn't speak about from a caps or any sweetener perspective, if you don't like bitterness, for instance, in lemons or berries or grapes, adding some sweetness to that can knock or take away those bitter notes for you, right? But then another thing for EM is if you are chasing a candy type profile, EM can come useful because it has a bit of a candy kind of note to it, right? And if you're working with a candy, then I'm either going to look at cap super sweet, right, really high, or I'm going to look at EM because it's got that candy note embedded in it. That could be useful. Then finally, there's one here. I'm not sure a lot of people, are speaking about this. I've recently started, testing this out, but I think it's worth mentioning as part of this show, is stevia. So this is a BLCK stevia. Let me just see if you can you guys read that, stevia, just so that people can see how it's spelled. But stevia is, you'd have to be careful with it. It's like, same as with PG, some people have allergic reactions to it, same as stevia. It's become quite popular with soft drinks, like Coca-Cola uses that in their Life range, that green Coca-Cola can, for sweetness instead of using sugar. But like TFA sweetener, it's got a bit of an aftertaste to it. However, where I found that with super sweet, when adding super sweet to fruit mixes, the sweetness can become quite overwhelming. Okay, especially if the actual fruit already has some embedded sweetness in them. Okay, then stevia, using it extremely low, can actually help pop a fruit a little bit better than what super sweet would do. So it's got that application in it. And then just the final note that I have is, a lot of people would say that they don't use sweetener at all. The reality of it is, if you go and look at the spec sheets of Flavor West and TFA, they've put them out. You're going to find sweetener and a lot of EM in those, as part of those specs. So, there's almost little way of avoiding it, and walking around saying, I don't use sweetener in my mixes is not actually technically right. It's not right. You are using it already, or most of the people are. But yeah, is there anything else that we need to add to this sweetener show? Nope. Right.
Donate to sweetener.
That's sweet.
Sweetener is not bad.
Do it.
That's good.
What does Tabby say? Hashtag give it a go, you know? I don't think people should be afraid of using it. A lot of people just don't like sweetener, but you know, the stigma around sweetener, you know, is, I don't think it should be there. If you want sweetness, use it. You know, there's tons of good sweetener here, and I think I can't remember his name now, but in the mixologist group on Facebook, he was saying sweetener to e-juice is like salt to a steak. You know, which I think is a very good explanation of what where my mind is at with sweetener. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching the show and tuning in. Anything that we didn't add about sweetener or sweetener that we didn't discuss, or some notes on it, or any information, leave those in the comments below so that people can find it when they watch the show in the future. But thank you so much for tuning in. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.